Today I will tell you 15 myths about pyramids, pharaohs, and Egyptians that I want to share with you. You may already know some of them, or maybe they will be new. I invite you to tell me your opinion in the comments section. The Egyptian kings were called pharaohs. Each Egyptian king had several first names, but pharaoh was not found. Only in the 14th century BC, the common people began to call the royal palace, the main court, and the king with the notion of pharaoh, just as the Pope and his entire collective power were called the Holy See. During this time, the captive Israelites took the term pharaoh for the king and assimilated it, as the title of the king, into everything they wrote. In the year 950 BC, the term pharaoh became the official title of the Egyptian ruler. Cheops was buried in the Pyramid of Cheops. The Great Pyramid houses two tombs. One is, as in other pyramids, under the building. The second is at a height of about 42 meters and is surrounded by several small rooms and mine shafts, which are not yet fully discovered. In the unadorned rooms, the researchers found a heavy and unfinished sarcophagus made of pink granite, in which a body was never found. However, it is not known if Cheops was buried in a hidden place or was involved in a funeral ritual as a result of which his body was lost. The pyramids were built by slaves. The Egyptian people were mobilized to build the pyramids. Every summer, during the period when the Nile flooded the plains, the workers managed to earn a living. In exchange for their work, they received free shelter, food, and even a small payment. In addition, working to build pyramids was considered a duty to the gods. Researchers value the fact that tens of thousands of such workers were employed during the construction season. In addition to these, there were certainly several hundred other skilled workers. The tombs of the pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings were well hidden. The tombs of the lighthouses in the huge pyramids were looted by grave robbers, despite the secret hatches and corridors. Therefore, in the 16th century BC, the pharaohs moved their burial sites to the narrow and winding Valley of Kings. At first, it was thought to be a secret place. The graves were worked in the rock, at a height of about 30 meters. However, in a short time, those who built their graves in the valley, the kings decided to leave the tombs at ground level, and the magnificent and ornate entrances were to be constantly monitored. However, neither half of the two techniques were applied against grave robbers. Tutankhamun had a great tomb. Young and somewhat unimportant, the leader Tutankhamun is buried in the only tomb that has not been looted. In addition, the tomb was rather modest and small, which went unnoticed precisely because of this. Knowing that it was built later, just above the magnificent entrance to the tomb of Ramses VI, it is believed that the arrangements in other tombs were even more precious. The pyramids look like 4,500 years ago. The ancient Egyptians would describe the current state of the pyramids as extremely poor. Initially, the pyramids were decorated with white limestone slabs, polished. The ancient eyewitness exalted himself by having in the moonlight something resembling the interior of a bright crystal. In addition, the top was covered with gold. When the sun's rays hit this peak, it was believed to be a direct link between heaven and earth, respectively between the sun god and the king. Such golden peaks were also found on obelisks. The Sphinx is a female figure. The Egyptian Sphinx is the representation of a pharaoh with the body of a lion. No doubt of Pharaoh Chephen, so a male figure. The Sphinx probably represents Pharaoh as the god of the sun. The later built sphinxes, from Karaic and Luxor, have ram heads, like the new supreme god Ammon. But in Greek mythology, the Sphinx is a monster, half female, half predatory feline. And the sphinxes of the Hittites were female. Ancient Egypt was a great armed force. The Egyptian pharaohs were happy to appear in war or when enemies were defeated, but their military campaigns were long limited to confrontations with Libyan nomads or Cossacks in Sudan. However, Egypt did not compare with the great powers of the moment, as evidenced by the defeat suffered by the Hittites, who at the time were not a real challenge. Only after 1500 BC, the policy of expansion began. To a nomadic people, like the Israelites, the pharaoh with the stallions and chariots seemed imposing. The migration of the Israelites from Egypt is a legend. Undisputed fact. No pharaoh of the mentioned period drowned in the Red Sea. The mummies of all were found. But during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II, there are reports that Asians, as the Egyptians called all the tribes beyond Sinai, were used as workers in the construction of 20 granary cities. Probably some nomadic Israelite tribes moved to Egypt during a drought, around 1250 BC, and then continued their journey to Canaan. The Egyptians worshipped cats and crocodiles. The ancient Egyptians idolized gods imagined as humans, but they came from ancient totem animals and were therefore represented with animal heads. It was not until the 7th century BC, following the domination of the Assyrians, that an extreme obsession with the supposed ancient traditions was reached. Suddenly, ancient titles and ports were reintroduced. At the same time, holy animals began to be worshipped and mummified after their deaths, believing that this was typical Egyptian behavior. The Romans and Greeks mocked this custom. Cleopatra was Egyptian. Cleopatra VII was descended from the Macedonian tribe of Ptolemies who ruled Egypt since 367 BC. During the Ptolemies, Alexandria became the most important commercial center and a mecca of science. They indeed took over some Egyptian traditions, but in reality, the country was divided. All strategic positions were occupied by Ptolemy. The Egyptians were mostly peasants and producers of wheat, from whose export they survived. Cleopatra had a nice nose. In this respect, the claims of the ancient authors are unanimously in contradiction with the Asterix comics. Cleopatra was not particularly beautiful, and on top of that, she had a big, crooked nose. Historians, however, adored Cleopatra's charm and power of seduction. Besides, her intelligence was also famous. Not only did she do well in politics, but she also knew 6 foreign languages. She was the first Ptolemaic and Egyptian woman leader. The image of intrigue and debauchery was fabricated by her political opponent, Octavian Augustus, the future emperor of the Roman Empire. The ancient Egyptians knew how to ride. An eloquent and frequently used image for rendering those times is that of cavalry. However, neither during the Trojan War nor during the time of the ancient Egyptians did he ride. The first people to venture into the saddle were the Scythians in 1000 BC. The new sport was taken over from them by the Persians, Assyrians, Celts, and Germans, while the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans remained faithful to the phaeton. However, riding was characteristic only of the people whose trousers were parted. The people of the sea sailed the sea. In the 12th century BC, Egypt was attacked by unknown populations, arriving by boat on the Mediterranean Sea. However, the attackers were only part of a wave of migrations, which in the 11th century BC he set out from the Balkans and set in motion many tribes in the eastern Mediterranean. In general, they were collectively referred to as seafarers, although, for example, the Phrygians, who destroyed the Hittite Empire, came from the land. The best known representatives of the men of the sea were the Philistines, who are mentioned in the Bible. Egyptian rulers usually married their stepbrothers. Marriage between stepbrothers was common and served mainly to legitimize the descendants of the pharaoh, with one of the lower-ranking wives who could legitimize himself. Indeed, it seems that in Egypt for 2,000 years there were no major conflicts over the succession to the throne. The marriage between the blood brothers was introduced by Arsinoe II, who married the beatified brother, Ptolemy, and took the reins of the leadership for him.